if you would, to Exodus chapter 40. Start with the first verse. And the Lord said to Moses, set up the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, on the first day of the first month. Place the ark of the testament in it, and shield the ark with the curtain. Bring in the table, and set out what belongs on it. Then bring in the lampstand, and set it up its lamp. Place the gold altar of incense in front of the ark of the testament, and put the curtain at the entrance to the tabernacle. Place the altar of burnt offering in front of the entrance to the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. Place the basin between the tent of meeting and the altar, and put water in it. Set up the courtyard around it, and place the curtain at the entrance to the courtyard. Take the anointing oil and anoint the tabernacle and everything in it. Consecrate it and all its furnishings, and it will be holy. Then anoint the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils. Consecrate the altar, and it will be most holy. Anoint the basin and its stand, and consecrate them. Bring Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the meeting, and wash them with water. Then dress Aaron in sacred garments, anoint him and consecrate him, so he may serve me as a priest. Bring his sons and dress them in tunics. Anoint them just as you anointed their fathers, so they may serve me as priests. Their anointing will be to a priesthood that will continue for all generations to come. And Moses did everything just as the Lord commanded him. So the tabernacle was set up on the first day of the first month in the second year. Skipping to verse 34. And then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel during all of their travels. Lord, we thank you for the day you've given us. We thank you especially for your word. We thank you for the opportunity to study it without hindrance. Bless us in all that we do. Your son's name. All right. Quick review. Last couple of weeks, we've been studying Exodus, and we've been at Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. They arrived there after 3 months of travel. Now, that Egypt took 3 months to arrive at Mount Sinai. Of course, they had some stops along the way, and some things take place, but not done. 90 days later, they arrived at Mount Sinai. They had met Yahweh, God of their forefathers. They'd never met him before, never heard of him. Well, they heard of him. They hadn't heard him. They heard his voice. They had been given commandments on how to live in every aspect of their lives, on how to respect God and how to respect their fellow man. God had revealed to them his promise that he had promised to their forefathers, and how he was going to fulfill that promise through them by taking them into the land that he had promised them. And they confirmed that covenant with God. He would be God, they would be his people. He would provide and do these things for them, and they would, in fact, serve him and obey him as their God. Not all the gods that talked about back in Egypt and all that. But Moses was up on the mountain, and he was up there for 40 days, and while he was up there, they had a really not very smart thought came into their head, and they made a golden calf. Corey talked about that last week. I wasn't here. A couple things to think about when they did that is that calves or bulls were always the go-to God, the go-to representation of God in just about every single culture. But to them, more specifically, the Egyptian culture, the face of a calf or bull, cattle, was basically the representation of the God to them. And it was considered in most times that the cow basically held up, was like the footstool or that which carried the God. So they looked at it upon that way, and so therefore that's why almost every idol was a representation. That represented a God was designed or looked very much like that. You see that in a lot of cultures. I mean, Later on, we'd see it in the cultures in Canaan and some of the things that are there, how they had that same kind of concept. They decided that they were going to, after they made that they had made a calf, which was, like we talked about. They decided after that they were going to have a festival to the Lord. Basically, a worship celebration, as they would define it. Of course, their worship celebration, the only thing they had in their mind would be what? Celebrations they saw back in Egypt. So to them, that was the way they did it. So they were having this worship celebration of the Lord, this festival of the Lord, as the text reads. And they offered sacrifices, burnt sacrifices. They ate and drank and became involved in revelry, which literally in Hebrew means immorality. So they did this, and they chose to worship Yahweh just as the Egyptians did. It wasn't that they had thrown him out, even though in a way they had, because what had God just given them? Pretty specific instructions, didn't he? And one of them was very clearly, don't do that. Don't make a graven image. Don't make any kind of representation. Don't kind of do anything whatsoever that represents me in any form, fashion, whatever. Because I'm better than anything you all could ever create. Plus, if you've got God in your midst, what do you need a representation for? That's really what God emphasized. But so they went ahead and they chose to worship him like the Egyptians did, and God punished him. And he went through, and there was a couple different things he did or whatever. He even decided he was going to take Moses in the promised land and forget all these people. Moses talked him out of it. Had a discussion with him, and God relented and didn't abandon his people, but he did make them pay a price for their rebellion, because that's what it was. You didn't do what I said, and pretty clear, and here you did it, and so therefore he punished you. After that, there are several chapters where we find that God, first of all, Moses goes back up because he had done what to the stones that God had written on? Broke them. Pretty bad. Broke them. So he went back up for God to rewrite his commandments, rewrite his covenant, his testimony. It's called a bunch of different things throughout the Old Testament. To rewrite it on there. Plus, he was also given some more directions on some things to do about worship. And specifically, God set out to tell him how they should worship him. Right? He just told them how not to. He went back and reiterated that when they tried it anyway. And so now he's going to tell them exactly how they were worshiping. So he gives a list of instructions how to worship him. So he goes up on the mountain, gets this, God relies the law on the tablets, and Moses keeps coming back and forth, and with the people or whatever. And he's told how to build the tabernacle. Now, in the next few chapters after that, we find that, did anybody get a chance to read the section between 32 and 40? Chapter 32 and 40? 32, basically what did he do? Now that God said, okay, I want you to build a tabernacle, a place and a way to worship me. What did Moses do with that information? He went back to the people, and the Bible says that God chose two men. Okay? Those two men he filled with the Spirit. And he chose those two men to lead the effort to build his house of worship. See, his house of worship wasn't just randomly done. It wasn't a bunch of people sent out to Chattanooga Tent and Awning and said, build me a tent. Now, here's the specs. Go build it. It wasn't that. God actually put his Spirit into two people to lead, gave them not just the knowledge, but the ability and the skills of craftsmanship. They probably already had some. God blessed it and made it to where they would be able to do what he wanted. And then they were tasked with fabricating the tabernacle, the place, the tent of meeting, the place where God would, and his people would meet in order for them to worship him. And so he does that, and these two men were then taken and given the task of instructing, teaching, and directing the work of these other craftsmen. Now, the Bible goes on to say that God put His Spirit in other craftsmen and showed them how to do it, so that they would be able to use their best skills in order to accomplish the fabrication of this tabernacle. And so as they go out to fabricate it, we find that God has placed His Spirit in two people, plus the craftsmen that are going to do this. He wants it to be done right. He wants it to be done consecrated or holy, special, not just a tent. They were also living in tents right there. But not just a tent, but something very special and done exactly the way He wanted. So He did that. Then Moses sent out a call to the people and said, okay, here's your chance. He said, ask for a fellowship offering. They were to bring articles that they needed for the fabrication of the tabernacle. Gold, jewels, silver, tapestries, thread, linen, all the different things that were necessary to make this. Wood, poles, whatever they could do. The Bible says that they brought it day by day by day until finally the two lead craftsmen said, it's enough, tell them to stop. And so Moses went back and told them. This is in direct contrast to what they'd just done in our study last week. Last week, they did what they wanted. They took their stuff, they made this calf, and did their own way. Now they're doing what God said, and the Bible says that they gave and gave more than that was really required. I think that's good to note that as this tabernacle was built, the Spirit of God was involved from the beginning of the construction, through the people that did it, through the blessing of the people who provided the gifts, to the fact that it was over in abundance of what God was asking for. And so we find that in the chapters that follow up to chapter 40, that's what they were doing. The skilled craftsmen fabricated it, and I don't know how long it took, but it took a little while. They fabricated everything from the Ark of the Covenant to the poles that stood and the poles that held the curtains on the perimeter. Every single thing they fabricated exactly the way the Lord has. As a matter of fact, they fabricated it as they had been told to do in the latter part of chapter 39. Verse 42 says, the Israelites had done all the work just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Moses inspected the work and saw that they had done it just as the Lord had commanded. So Moses blessed them. When they did things the way God said, it worked out. But they were very, very specific, and Moses even inspected it to ensure that everything was done in the exact same detail that God had given him on Mount. All right? So he does this, and then we come to the first verse of chapter 40. Here, let me skip ahead. I have a picture here for outside. This here, and I talked to somebody that asked me about something about it. I mentioned, I think once before, that cattle was not common in Arabia. It was today, it wasn't common there. However, in Arabia, where this site of Mount Sinai, that many people believe is, we have a place right there added, a hieroglyphic showing cattle. It's not common, something that would have had to come from somewhere else to be there, out in this desert. So we see what many consider a good sign that lots of people had been there, because they were the ones that the Bible said brought the cattle with them into the wilderness. This is one representation. That's actually not a representation. This is an Egyptian calf. There are a lot of them are similar to this. Some are standing, some are on bigger, different things, but they're all very similar in style to this, with the crown or whatever that is up above their head and everything. They're very, very similar in style to that. That would have been something similar to what they would have, Aaron would have made. This here is a representation of what the tabernacle would have looked like. They would have built. On the first day of the first month of the second year, the Bible says that they assembled it. So they had spent some time fabricating it. Now, on the beginning of the second year, now the first day was when they were in Egypt. So now, 1 year later, here they are setting up the place where God and His people would get together to worship. All right? So several things here, and let me point out a few of them. Be real quick. We read through some of the where they did the furnishings. All right. This here is the surroundings here for the courtyard. Basically, I'm going to show you a picture of one that's actually assembled for to look like that in a desert. And then the picture, and you'll get an idea of just how big, or not so big, it really appears to be. When you consider a million people or whatever out there, you start realizing how large this is. First of all, the tabernacle proper was this. Okay? A lot of times we talk about this as the tabernacle. This is actually the courtyard, the place where the people and the would come to meet here. This is where man would be. This is where God and only His select would be at certain times. So when you read in there that God's glory descended upon the tabernacle or the tent of meeting, this is where it descended. So these priests would be outside here. Matter of fact, it says Moses could not enter in. That means Moses was out here because he was not able to go in because God had filled it. All right. So this is the perimeter. This is what they call the bronze altar. It's where the burnt sacrifices that were made on a regular basis. Here, and here is the basin where they would purify themselves before they went and did anything before God themselves. This here is the tabernacle tent. You can see how it's fabricated with the wood structure to hold it up, the coverings that would go over it to protect it. Inside, you find the table of showbread, which had bread on it. Does anybody remember how many loaves of bread? 12, one per tribe. Okay? We will find the lampstand, the golden lampstand that sits here. Here's the altar of incense. Now, the altar of incense is where they would offer incense before God before they went to the Holy and Most Holy. That was done like once a year. Is that right? That's what I was thinking. It was only used once a year for this specific entrance into the Holy of Holies. What you have here is a beautiful tapestry that's separated so nobody can see in there but the priests that were allowed to go in. And then you have the one that's the Holy of Holies, which is the place where God would reside. And on it you'll find the cherubim were embroidered upon that particular tapestry. Inside, you would find the Ark of the Covenant. Ark of the Covenant would be the place, would be the mercy seat, the place where God resided. That's where He would be. So when the Bible says that the glory of the Lord was there, God was in His temple. God was here on earth amongst His people, sitting on His throne. When you studied Joshua, remember how I told you that the ark went before Him because it was the throne. It was the king's, what the king would sit and lead on, just like they would in any other civilization. The king would be he would not be riding necessarily on a horse or whatever. He would be the one who would be leading the procession or whatever. That's what God did when we crossed over Jordan. He was on His seat as they led. Here it is where He would meet with them. And then once a year, we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, so that's what it would look like here. This is a pictorial representation of the bronze altar and the implements that he fabricated in order to offer the sacrifice, bulls and goats, for the people. That's the large altar outside in the courtyard area. There's a representation of the altar of incense. Let's talk about a little bit. Probably the same height, if I remember right, it's the same height, but it's much smaller this way. It's more about the incense that's put upon it, not bulls and goats and things like that. Of course, you see the horns, all of them have horns where the blood would be placed. Not getting into the detail of how all that worked. This is a model or mock-up of the Ark of the Covenant. Basically, it was a box, held by poles, totally wrapped in gold. Cover was be placed on top of it. Inside were three things. Everybody remember what those three things are?
10 Commandments.
10 Commandments.
Gold jar of manna.
Jar of manna. And what? Aaron's
rod.
Aaron's rod. Okay, Aaron's rod. Those three things were placed inside this here. The important thing they're all important. God would put them in there. But one thing to think about is commandments. A lot of times we call them that. They're also called the covenant and multiple things. That is basically the agreement that God said, this is what you will do and what I will do. So it was his covenant. It was the agreement that between his people and him. It was placed in here. Once a year they would come and they would sprinkle blood where? On the mercy seat. They would come and sprinkle blood on it. And that was a way to not just absolve them of the violations of this covenant that was in here, but it was a way to remind them and to tie back together that it takes blood whenever you violate or anything related to this covenant. The covenant is here, and you need to remember that covenant that you made with God. So once a year, it was important that this took place, not just for forgiveness like we talk about all the time, or rolling it forward, or however we do it, but it was as much to say, remember the covenant you made with God at Sinai, at the mountain of the Lord. To remember how you agreed that he would be your God, and only your God, and that you would be his people. And so that took place there. You see the cherubims that are on each side, the idea being that they were there to shelter God. Some others say that it was the idea that this is where he placed his feet, and he sat upon those. There's different takes. It doesn't really matter because God's the Spirit, and he doesn't do any of those. But the idea is this is where God's presence was when he dwelt among his people. And all right. So Moses sets up the tabernacle on the first day of the first month of the second year. He assembled it and with all the directions according to the way God had planned on it. He placed all the furnishings. That's what we read in chapter 40. How he carried all the furnishings and placed them in the proper place. Not only did he put furnishings in, what did he do to those furnishings? He consecrated them. What does that mean? Set them apart. Made them holy. Okay? That's what that means. To make them holy. He purified them. He did the things God said in order to make them special. Versus common or ordinary. So he made them holy. Not only did he make the emblems holy, but he made what else holy? Should I say, who else? The priest. Those that would serve in there, those who would come in contact with these implements, that would be in the presence or in those places. They were made holy too, consecrated before the Lord at that time, just like God had commanded. It says, then the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And when the cloud was upon it, who was there? God was there. He was in the midst of his people. It was a tent of meeting. It was a place where they could go before God. That's a place they could worship him. They could sacrifice to him. They could plead for forgiveness. They could do all the things that God would do as their God, and they could expect as his people. This was the place where they came in contact with Yahweh. He didn't need a representation like a calf. He was there himself. Okay? So he turns around, and when he was, the cloud came down and sat upon it. When it came down and sat upon the tent of meeting, God was in session. If you want to look at it that way. The king was there. Court was in session. Look at all kinds of ways we would consider it. But God, his whole presence was there. And no one could go in where he was at. All right? So, but there were times that the cloud was here, it would lift off, and it would be up in the air. What does the Bible say took place then? It's time to go. As long as he was there, Everybody stayed still. When God's cloud lifted, it was time to pack up, assemble everything, and move. And we would find throughout the Numbers, as he would lead them for 40 years, as he wandered and took them to where we studied in Joshua, where he would go into the promised land. He would lead them this way, just like that. And that cloud, as they led with him, and all these implements, he would tell them how to carry them and how to pack them up. And basically, he would go before them with his Ark of the Covenant, his mercy seat, leading underneath. Depending upon the situation or times that he would pull it into the middle. But anyway.
I didn't realize the other night, I don't know why I had to realize, that they traveled at night. In my mind, it was, well, I guess it had been light at night, but while they were camping, they would walk through the day and camp at night, and that's not the case. They would travel day and night until he chose the place for them, for the next place that he said. And I kind of questioned that in my mind, because every time they started, they said, and that would take hours.
Right.
For them to do every night, if they just were heading towards somewhere and they walked as far as they could and then they camped for the night. But it clearly says that this was a light for them as when they walked at night.
That's correct. That's correct. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I always, we skip over and over to realize that in those 90 days that they traveled from Egypt to Mount Sinai, a lot of that was on the move, day and night. You say, well, how far can they go? They're all walking. There's 1 million people. When you travel day and night, and you're going, go. You do. Let me ask you a question. Has anybody ever been to Saudi Arabia? Google the temperature at Saudi Arabia. When would you rather travel?
At night.
Hey, there we go. I forgot. You got some folks been over there? Yeah, at night. At night. It's just like going to the desert, around Vegas, or whatever, Nevada, whatever. It is blistering in the day. You're going to be hiking? Go at night. My son likes to take me hiking every time I go to Colorado. He takes me out to Utah and all those places, Arizona and all that. It's hot. Even in November, September when we go, it's like, oh my goodness, thank you, brains out. But anyway, but the contrast is you freeze yourself you're in a month or so. Anyway, of course, we've been making our brains out all summer and it went straight to winter, so what can I say? All right, anyways, enough of that. Good point, Don. They traveled and traveled till they put himself down. So he says that the cloud lifted, then he would lead them where they needed to go to lead his people. On the Day of Atonement, there was the blood of sacrifice sprinkled on the ark's lid, just like we talked about, which was a covering of the covenant. It brought by forgiveness for violating that covenant, but also brought remembrance to the covenant that they had made with God. This, and I've written this down, was proper worship to Yahweh. This is the way God wanted worship to be. This was not and totally foreign to any type of worship that was going on at that time. All idol worship was exactly the way they did it when they worshiped the golden calf. This is in contrast to it. It had sacrifice, it had atonement, it had respect, it had all these things. It was done God's way, not man's way. It was done for God to please Him, not for man to make Him happy. Look at the way when they tried to worship the golden calf, how it was all revelry and party and festival. That's not what God's want. God wants you to come in here and remember that you made an agreement to live His way, and you hadn't lived up to it, and He was going to make it right. All right? It was serious and holy when it comes to worshiping God, and it wasn't a party or profane. And profane, which means common or whatever. Okay? This was a direct contrast to the Egyptian worship to the gods, just as they had been brought up to believe and were raised, how they thought worship was all about. Right? I don't know what all Corey went over about worship last week, but we need to keep that lesson in mind. Sometimes worship in places today is about me. That's what got him in trouble last week. It's about God. Always. All right. Going on, take just a couple minutes here. I want to kind of do a summary of this quarter real quickly, because some very valuable things we learned here. When we talk about Exodus, we always talk about the crossing of the Red Sea, and we always talk about the plagues. We talked about the Ten Commandments, all these are great stories. I had them growing up in every single Bible lesson, and we need to do that. In fact, we probably don't do enough. But what we really, hopefully, we accomplished in this lesson, this quarter, was to learn a couple things. One of them is this. A question that I have never really seen before, and hopefully you got it. It was said by Pharaoh, but it was echoed by every single person in Egypt, including God's people. Who is this Yahweh that I should obey? And I didn't grow up learning that question, but that was really the gist of Exodus. God introduced himself and said, I am the God of the universe, and there is no other like me. And everything about Exodus goes about demonstrating just that. How he, first of all, he was the God of Abraham. He made him a promise. He was the God of Jacob, Israel. He made him a promise. And the God of the forefathers, which meant he was the God of these specific people. They had a special place in his heart, his mind, his plan. He was greater than all the Egyptian gods or any gods that could be fabricated. The Egyptians had got one for everything, and a couple for some. He was powerful, and they were powerless, and Yahweh demonstrated that. That's what the book of Exodus shows. Yahweh had power, nobody else did. He demonstrated that he was holy, and he required respect. It was not about a party. It was not about doing what you wanted or whatever you thought you wanted in order to celebrate the seasons and the harvest and this and that so that you would have a good harvest. It was not about all that. It was about showing the proper respect for Yahweh. But if you think about it, if you had all these gods that really hadn't demonstrated any power, but maybe they were handling the rain and the soil, okay. But now we have a God that physically moves mountains and physically opens the sea and physically destroys the greatest army on earth. And then physically, wait a minute. Talk about respect. Maybe you ought to be showing some respect for somebody that can demonstrate these things. I always found out that, if someone had the power to show you something, then you better show them respect, whether you agree or not. You ever found that to be the case? In our world? So it should have been a situation there. The second thing we get out of this Exodus is this. We see God's covenant, part one. Three parts of that covenant that I kind of break it into. The first one was, this is the part he said, I will make to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. He promised them that he would make them a great nation, a people. Before that, they were a family. There were a bunch of descendants of Abraham. When he pulls them out of Egypt, he takes them out and says, you are not Egyptian. You are not a subculture in Egypt. You're not even a future part of a culture in the land of Palestine or Canaan. You are a people. I pulled you out, and he didn't take them to Canaan. Where did he take them? To nowhere. The middle of the desert. And he makes them into a people. He shows them his power. And he provides he gathers his people, removes them from Egypt. He provided them with a law to live by. Not just a spiritual aspect of the law, but an everyday law that applies in every application of life. So they were given a law, just like any nation would have. The Egyptians had a law. The Canaanites had a law. Now the Israelites have a law. They're a people. They have a law. And he provided them with the direction and the means and methods on how to worship their God. So Just like Egypt had all their gods, worthless, Israel now has a God that would lead their nation. So he turns around and he takes them and gives them the first part of the covenant, which is, I will make you a great nation. The next part is he's going to give them a land to live in. That's where Joshua comes in. Okay? We studied it. And the third part is he would bless all the nations. That's us. Because of all of that. Okay? That's the third part of the promise. So the first part of it goes into effect right here in the book of Exodus. Let me see. And the third thing I wanted us to get out of the summary of Exodus is this. He became their God, and they his people. There are many lessons that we've come across in the Old Testament, different prophecies. When we studied Revelation, a couple years ago, when we studied Revelation, it talks about that now, and I've done sermons now, Revelation 21 says, now I will be their God, and they will be my people. From the very beginning, when he talked to Adam and Eve, he was their God. They were his people. That was lost in the garden. And the goal is at the end of this physical world, we would get to a point where there would be God, a group of people that would look to God to be their God, and he would look to a certain people to be his people. That's what God has always wanted from the beginning. And now he's going to do it in a physical sense with a nation of people. He's going to demonstrate that he's their God and they're his people. In doing this, as their God, he's going to guide them. He will protect them. He will provide for them. And he will bless them. Go back to that covenant. That's what it's all about. That's what it means to be their God. On the other hand, he wanted a people that belonged to that God, and he would create those people at that time. And they would depend upon him. Look how much he required dependence. Oh, you got a military army behind you? Fine. Just walk out into that sea. Excuse me? Even after he moved the waters, I'd still be thinking, how good are my swimming skills? Because I don't know when the water's coming back. You have to depend on him as a people. He required dependence. They had to follow him. He led them into the sea. That's where you go. Where that cloud takes you. Where God was at in that cloud. Wherever he went, you went. Even in places that they weren't real happy about going. Okay? They would have to trust him. Put their faith in him. That he would, in fact, protect them from that military. That he would, in fact, protect them. You know, they got in two skirmishes. Another with the Amalekites. And he defeated them. Well, how? By holding Moses' hand. You know, so that they would win. God said, as long as his hands are up, you're winning. Okay, trust him. Hold his hands up. They did, and they won. So as a people, they had to trust him. And then, in the process of all that, one thing is always required. Obedience. Obedience. You cannot leave obedience out of any of those things as a people, period. A king that rules in this world, he may require that you trust him, follow him, depend upon him, and all that, but he always requires absolute obedience. We understand in this world. Why do we not understand it when it comes to God? I don't understand. Why we think with God, the King of all kings, that we can suddenly just do what we want to do. But we would never do that, even in a democracy where the law says, thou shalt do such and such. We do that 98% of the time. But we do. That's what it means to be a people. He became their God, and they became his people at this particular moment in time. And then, when he became their God, and they became his people, he came and dwelt among them. He made his home among them. You know, he promised in Revelation that he'll have us. Our home will be with him. As we are his people and he is our God, our dwelling place will be with him. He came to us and dwelt amongst us. Today, when we go into this is a representation, study Hebrews is going to point that out, of God's throne. It'll be a day that we'll actually be in His presence, in His home, instead of in a house that He put down here in the middle of us. All right. Any last thoughts, comments about Exodus? Sir?
How'd you like to have a construction crew like Moses had?
That'd be good. Mine aren't always filled with the Spirit of God. And they don't always perform to that standard.
Kind of hard to impart what's in
They
their
don't always
head.
show up when you want them to show up either. All righty. I appreciate it. Next week we're going to take a look at Acts. I think we're going to start Acts chapter 2, if I recall correctly. Right, Corey?